Welcome to Purple Easel Spotlight, where we put the spotlight on artists and creatives. My name's Latoya.
And I'm Megan.
And we're both art instructors here at Purple Easel, California's largest paint sip studio. Today we're going to be talking about Michelangelo, the Michelangelo, not the Ninja Turtle. Not the Ninja Turtle. And I see what you got on today.
I sure do.
I see what you've done here.
I am so stoked for this episode. Yeah, so there's a lot on Michelangelo, but I'm going to try to jam through some of the kind of background bits so we can get to the good stuff. Because this drama.
Ooh, I love drama.
Yeah. So Michelangelo was born in 1475. And his mom had some trouble nursing him.
Oh.
So he ended up staying with a wet nurse and was sent off until he was like 6 years old. And then unfortunately, his mother passed away. In the meantime, she had cranked out a bunch more kids and they got to live at home, but he had been sent away.
What?
Don't understand the reasoning there. But the family he was with, the wet nurse's husband, was a stonecutter. So he had exposure very young to kind of all of the tools of the trade, and it's said that he could handle a chisel before he could read and write, and I think that's just adorable. He didn't even go to school until he was 10 years old when his father remarried, and his stepmom was like, you need to do the things. And then because he was such a brilliant mind, even at an early age, he decided school was not for him. We hear that a lot.
Yes.
So he kind of just did his thing, but he apprenticed and kind of went into the art bits, and his dad was like, you need to be a merchant, you need to do a trade, you need to do something to make money and prolong the family name. Little did he know Michelangelo would become so famous.
He's like, okay.
We were on with one name.
Yes.
And unlike other artists, it's his first name, not his last name.
Not like
which is so funny to
Picasso.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Michelangelo happened to be in Florence right at the time when it was becoming the intellectual center of the world. And you may be familiar with the Medici family.
Yeah.
They had their hands in a lot of things, politics, art, the papacy, like all kinds of stuff. And one of the patrons, I think he was the third generation. He was really trying to lean into that. He was probably one of the most art-centered Medicis out of all of them, Lorenzo. And he was highly influential to the Florentines. In fact, he was so influential, he started a school, which Michelangelo then attended and learned more about sculpture. But Michelangelo didn't have it easy. He was basically the definition of a tortured artist. His dad was abusive for the little time that he was with his dad without being sent away. He was considered very optimistic, but melancholy.
Oh, okay.
And the way that plays out is he was confident and he's like, I can do all these things. And he would agree to a bunch of projects and commissions, and he would overextend himself to the point where he couldn't deliver on timelines. He couldn't get all the things done. And then it made him depressed.
Yeah.
And it was just a bad cycle. And it sucks that like he went through all this stuff and he considered suffering as his lot in life, and that was just how it had to be. And he even like leaned into it to the point where when he had money, he was getting, commissions and all kinds of stuff, money from the Pope for things. He would just like live on bread while he was working, and he wouldn't even ever change his clothes. And he just like lived his work and forgot about everything else, including like basic human needs.
Yeah.
To the point, Toya, where he would finally take his boots off after weeks of wearing them and his skin would come off with them.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there's dedication.
Yeah.
And there's that.
Yeah. That's like taking stoicism into like...
He was the original emo boy. He went hard.
For real.
So because he had a background in sculpture, he really started to look around. He was in Florence, which was chock full of artists and artistry, and they were really into perpetuating the church and everything else. And Florence was kind of the rebels in Italy. And so they kind of clung on to certain icons, one of which was David, which we'll see how that plays later. But initially, Michelangelo would go around and sketch sculptures. And so you can see in his work is very heavy-handed. And this is an example of how he's basically put sculpture into a flat painting. And when I originally saw this, it was in black and white, and it's super evident in the black and white, less so in the color, but just the outlines and the amount of contrast really takes on kind of a sculptural form.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Probably, I don't know what kind of schooling. I'm just kind of think like if you study sculpture and like the anatomy of sculpture first and then draw it, seemed like he would be kind of ahead of the game as far as like anatomy goes.
Right, because you have literally hands-on experience with
Yeah.
how the body moves and works and how everything plays out. So it's just interesting as an example to see. And he really didn't start drawing for the sake of drawing until much later in his life. He always considered himself a sculptor first and foremost. But that style, that like lens that he looked through still shows up in other work, which I think is really cool. So we're going to talk about Pieta. And he considered this his heart's image. And it is Christ and Mary. And it was so revolutionary at the time because there's a lot of symbolism going on. It's Christ who is dead, but he's languid. He's fallen asleep. And you still see all the veining and everything when you look close and you get the details. And then Mary is portrayed as younger than Christ is at this point to exemplify her purity and her like exuberance and youth and all the things that Mary tends to symbolize to the Christian world. And then what's fascinating to me here is Mary, if she were standing, would be 7 feet tall and bigger than Christ. So she is proportionally much larger. In fact, like the head and the shoulders are larger in scale than the bottom portion of her body. And he purposely did that and played with the proportions. And there's a quote from him that I absolutely love. It's necessary to keep one's compass in one's eyes and not in the hand. For the hand executes, but the eye judges.
Nice.
So he knows intrinsically that sometimes you have to lie for something to make sense.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of creating work.
Yes.
Like he's manipulating the proportions so it doesn't look weird.
Yeah.
As you look at this and you're like,
No.
that reads
And it checks out.
fine.
Yeah. Well, then he actually started talking about it. I'm like, I see exactly what, like a part of me was like, oh, the legs are kind of big or whatever. But it didn't take away from my initial first judgment at it. And so he started talking. I'm like, wait a minute.
And it's crazy to think that he's thinking that far ahead and realizing how the viewer is going to interpret it.
I want to say that we do that a little bit sometimes when we teach our Paint Your Pets Here Purple Easel because obviously, you know, the customer has their dog and they know their dog. We haven't seen their dog. However, you want it to look good, don't you? So you might want to finesse a little bit. Something might be a little bit incorrect, but they love it because it looks like a good picture to them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take away some of the reality sometimes of what things are and what it looked like in the photo and add your own little spin that might not have been, that hair might not have been there or something might, but you add it in and then it makes sense to the eye and the mind.
You know what? Just listening to you explain that, it makes me think of when something is adapted from a book or something. And Game of Thrones is like the perfect example to me because in the very beginning seasons, you see Rose. Rose did not exist in the books. However, Rose's place in the show shows how she interacts with other characters and gives you insight to those characters in a much shorter snapshot than what you would be getting from the books. So her being added actually made a lot of sense in that regard. So it's all about context.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm so excited to talk about David. All right.
Lighten up.
All right. So I literally did not know until it became a thing recently where a teacher was fired because he showed a picture of David in his classrooms and the parents were like, nudity. Yeah. But it wasn't until that hit the headlines that I realized how big David is. My entire life, I thought he was like normal statue size.
Yeah. No.
He's 17 feet.
What? No.
That is 2 stories or an adult giraffe.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
So there's this piece of marble hanging out in the workyard in Florence for 35 years. A couple of artists have attempted to do something with it. They've started chiseling, like created a weird shape. Michelangelo has seen that piece of marble. They have a nickname for it. It is widely referred to as the Giant all throughout Florence and all the artist community. And he finally presents an idea and it is accepted. And he creates David.
Wow.
And a lot of the speculation is because it was already worked on, he had to create something in a position for what was left.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe where we get that contrapposto pose, which is a classic like Greek pose where they're leaning back on one leg.
What was that word?
Contrapposto.
What is that?
It's when you lean back.
What?
It's basically a way for the artist to
I didn't know that. I've never heard of
the
that.
statue.
Okay.
So if you notice at the bottom, he's got like a tree thing coming up, and that's so it doesn't crack as easily.
I see.
It's giving it more substance to support it. But it's a classic, like they'll use that pose so it looks, kind of natural. And then you also get the differentiation of the muscles. So one is flexed, one is loose, and it gives you a little bit more to play with in an artistic sense.
That's amazing.
This is the first time David had been depicted in the moment before battle. Normally, he is shown with Goliath's head. And Florence, feeling that they were the underdog, really related to David. And so people just went nuts for this statue. It sat outside in the plaza for like 360 years.
You know what? We couldn't do that in today's.
No, but you know what? Even then, even when people loved it, he used to have a crown of leaves, gold leaves. He had a sling that was made out of gold and probably covered some stuff.
Yeah.
And like that was commissioned because they were like, that's a little too much. We need to censor it a bit. But and that didn't make it. Like somebody probably stole that and melted it down at some point. It didn't survive. And then eventually they petitioned like, hey, can we move this inside so it doesn't get damaged more than it already had?
Yeah.
But even that didn't protect it.
Oh.
So there's a dude who got into the museum with a hammer and started hacking at his foot. And they weren't able to stop him until like a toe had already broken off. Like, I don't know why people do these things. I don't understand.
Okay.
It hurts my heart.
It does. I am feeling the pain.
Coming out of David, Michelangelo really started to experiment a little bit more and started drawing more. Most of his drawings were in study for his sculptures.
Okay.
He had tons and tons of sketches that he would do, and they would show measurements, things that he was considering when he was brainstorming whatever he was going to create. And he destroyed them all because he only wanted his work to be seen in its perfect form and not a work in progress. But this drawing is one of the only complete drawings that he did from beginning to end. It was like, yes, this is it. This is the thing.
Okay.
And I just think it's so cool. You can still see so much of that.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm
sculpture.
thinking about it once you said that. Yes. Drama, drama, drama.
Here's where it starts. Okay, so let me give you the tea. Pope Julius wanted to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica.
Okay.
Most people are like, no, it's such a holy site. Why would you mess with it? But it was kind of in shambles and falling apart. So he really wanted to put some resources into it. Mm-hmm. It got delayed a bit because he was considered the warrior pope. He would actually lead his armies out into the world to fight like factions that were causing issues. Mm-hmm. And for better or worse. But he was very much a supporter of the arts. And he got 2 architects to submit plans. One was Segallo. Segallo had worked with him on other things prior to that. They had a relationship. The other one was Barmonte.
Okay.
And Barmonte was the new guy. In the end, the Pope ended up liking Barmonte's proposal much better and decided to move forward with it. This put Segallo into immense shame at this point. Like, his career was over. He was run out of the city, is so embarrassed. Like, yeah. Like, this is the Renaissance. So, like, you're it until you're not it.
Oh, like you got shunned publicly.
Yes. And Segallo was a friend of Michelangelo's.
Okay.
Michelangelo was working on a tomb for the Pope. The Pope wanted him to design his tomb and do all these things. He had lots of statues that were like started and stopped and all this stuff. So Barmonte decided he needed to watch out for Michelangelo. He didn't trust him because his friend had gotten run out. Mm-hmm. So he started whispering in the Pope's ear, "Are you sure it's a good idea to do a tomb while you're still alive? That's not very good juju."
That's a very popey of you.
Why would you do that? Oh yeah, maybe you're right. So he basically decided to ghost Michelangelo. So he had been forwarding funds for Michelangelo to buy supplies and so on, as you did. That's how you commissioned art back in the day. And then the money stopped coming.
What?
And then so Michelangelo like kind of waited and then couldn't wait anymore. And he goes in there and he's all ready to like, wouldn't let him come in.
What?
Turned him away at the door. And people are like, dude, do you know who he is? And he was like, boss's orders. So Michelangelo's like, okay, I'm going back to Florence. I'm not going to stay in Rome for this.
Yeah.
On the way to Florence, he is stopped by the Pope's men and told, no, you need to come back at once under penalty of our displeasure. Which I think is hilarious, first of all. But he's like, well, okay, then the Pope needs to honor the contract. Like, that's what it is. He stayed in Florence. And letters were sent back and forth, and it was a whole thing. And finally, he's like, all right, I don't really want to piss off the warrior pope. Like, probably not the best idea. So he went back to continue working on the tomb. It was never really canceled, but it never really picked up steam again either.
Okay.
In the meantime, he was very excited because he had gotten some agent to kind of help get his work out there some more. And he created the Julius Colossus for the Pope. And he was given 1,000 ducats.
I thought it was ducats.
Ducats? Ducats? I don't even know. Whatever the monetary thing was for Italy.
It's probably not ducats. I think ducats comes later, right? I think it's a European thing. I don't know.
We could look at the Googles. So the tomb was kind of put on hold. It wasn't really canceled, but there wasn't any continuous work on it at that point. But the Pope gave him something else to do. And he commissioned the Julius Colossus. So he wanted him to make a statue of him instead of a tomb.
Okay. He's like, scratch that idea. Yeah, right. I un-Facebook friend you, and you know what? I had to like re-add you back. You know, it's fine. Let's forget about that.
It's never happened. So he throws 1,000 ducats at him, and Michelangelo, unfortunately, had never cast it in bronze before. So he way underestimated the cost.
Oh,
And basically lived in complete squalor for 3 years to do this commission.
Dang. Yeah, that a 3-year commission? They had a job by then.
Right. But yeah, he poured everything into the project. I think he even hired some assistants, and that didn't really work out. And so we got rid of the assistants. Michelangelo was known as being kind of difficult to work with. There are some sources that say he had like a bit of a temper, that he was quick to react. He saw offense in things that weren't meant to be offensive. So this whole thing with the Pope going back and forth, like, just helped make him more paranoid. And then, since he's in Rome again, it is believed that Bramante actually suggested Michelangelo to the Pope for his project of the Sixtine Chapel.
Okay.
Because it was a big undertaking. The Pope was looking for somebody to do it. And Bramante is like, oh, you could do Michelangelo. You already have a relationship with him. And Michelangelo did everything he could to be like, nah, I'm a sculptor.
Yeah.
I don't paint.
Yeah, that's not my jam.
But Bramante kind of pushed it in hopes, knowing that he was a sculptor, that Michelangelo would be forced into it, which he essentially was, and would embarrass the heck out of himself and basically become a laughing stock.
So you gotta do it.
Underhanded.
So you gotta do it. Oh, damn. Yeah, that is very underhanded.
But joke's on you, Bramante.
For real. Also, just side note, it's really, really stupid. I'm embarrassed to even say this, but I thought it was 16 Chapel.
16?
Not 16. Yeah.
16. Yes.
I was like, oh, it's really
common
like
mistake.
16? Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It sounds very similar. Sistine, I think, is considered the... I don't know where that comes from exactly. It's part of the basilica that he was redesigning. But I want to show you a fancy book that my daddy got me from a swap meet. And I have this super cool part. Aha.
Ooh.
So here we have the Sistine Chapel.
Wow.
He started when he was like 34. It
Okay.
took him 4 years. He basically lived on scaffolding. And at one point, like, the Pope would come in and be like, oh, how you doing? It's taking you too long. There were only supposed to be 12 figures.
So why did he go ham?
He's Michelangelo.
Okay.
Because he is Michelangelo, and he just overdid everything. So 12 turned into 300.
I see.
Yes. And
I was like, so are you gonna be done or?
right. And it got so bad, like, I think the Pope either threw something at him or hit him or something happened in an altercation where he was like, all right, and it started to do the, I'm just gonna leave again.
Oh, okay.
And the Pope like sent somebody to a bunch of extra money and was like, no, come back.
Yeah.
But then literally is like, no, it's time. The next day. Like, he fixed it for a day. And then Michelangelo was like, but I'm not done. And didn't matter. So this is an incomplete work. Everything we see is not what Michelangelo wanted.
How far was he?
I don't know. I don't know, because look at this. This is just one little part. This is probably the most iconic part. Is Adam and God. And like, even just the zoomed in bit, which I included for us to show, it's so iconic.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. Looking at it every time I get a chance to.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And there's so much going on. And it has that sculptural quality. And it makes sense for how far away the viewer was from it. He actually, it was complicated because there's a lot of foreshortening with the limbs to get the perspective right, with the fact that it's way there and you're down in the pews or whatever looking at it. Kind of the same thing he did with David too, you know, with the proportions. And it's like his magnum opus. It's astonishing work, and it is talked about
Oh, yeah.
everywhere.
You're talking about it right now.
Amongst all the drama, after the completion of Sistine Chapel, the Pope dies,
Oh,
as they do,
yes.
and it left this whole tomb situation.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about the tomb. Like,
So much has happened. This I wanted to include. This was an idea, something he had worked on over the course of this 40-year project and discarded. But I absolutely love it. It is not complete, but it was still intended to look like the figures are emerging from the block.
Okay.
And I think that is so cool, like conceptually.
I can't even wrap my head around it because just sculpting in general, because you're working in, how can I say this?
Subtractive sculpture is a totally different mindset.
Yes. And I see it all the time. Like, I'll go on Instagram and I'll see, they'll do it with pencils, like little they'll make sculptures with pencils.
Yes.
And I just can't wrap my head around that. So I can't really, I can only just be like, wow, that's pretty, because my mind won't even like allow me, because I try and then I'm all at a loss.
Right.
And I don't know how they do it.
A block and you're taking away what doesn't belong in the most simplistic version of it.
And they make it look so good and so smooth.
Yes. And they say that Michelangelo was so good that he would hit his chisel and take out pretty large chunks at a time and get within millimeters of the final, like dangerously close, right? Like normally you just take out like the larger chunks and then you whittle it down with other tools that give you more control. But no, he would just go right in. He knew exactly what he was doing. He could visualize the entire thing.
Like that, you gotta know your craft. Like he knows how to work with stone.
And that's why he's largely considered one of the greatest artists of all time, because he was so good, and he was so good at the things he wasn't even supposed to be good at. He was the epitome of a Renaissance man. And he basically outlived Leonardo and Donatello, everybody else who was part of the high Renaissance at the time.
All the Ninja Turtles.
Body of work. Yeah, all of the Ninja Turtles. I have one of those shirts too.
Nice. Also, I want to say, I would argue even that when you think of Michelangelo, kid me, like teenager me, wouldn't have even thought of the sculptures, because you think of the chapel, you think of all of that body of work and all that painting. So
and that wasn't even his jam.
So that's wild.
So I'm super excited to introduce our next artist. His name is Jacapo Cardillo. He's an Italian sculptor, and he goes by Iago.
Okay.
And it's so cool. I love his little like signature that he chisels in. It's legit. And I literally did Michelangelo because I saw this guy and I was like, oh man, this is amazing work. Oh my gosh. And then as I'm researching him, there's not very much information, by the way, but there are a couple articles be like, the new Michelangelo of Italy. And I'm like, yes, it totally is. And here we go. Let's take a look at this one.
I like that it's, sorry. No, go ahead. I like that it's still like in a case, or like in a casing type of situation.
It's the same idea of like emerging from the stone, but it's totally encapsulated this time. And I just...
And also, one thing I like about it is that it's so indented to where it's casting a shadow. It's going to cast a shadow. So you almost have like this rendering kind of like vibe to it. Because of the shadowing inside.
Yes. And I love how the outside is still raw and kind of untouched. And then you have the really clean straight lines and then the details in the hand, the veining, like the knuckles, everything.
The wrinkles on the like knuckle,
Yes. And I like your comment about the shadows, because that's definitely a part of the overall visual impact. So Iago also did the Pope.
Oh, Pope action.
Some more Pope action. He did Pope Benedict the 16th, which he then went back and modified when the Pope abdicated. which when has that ever happened? He submitted this original one to the Vatican and they were like, no, because it doesn't have eyes, which is kind of an odd thing to get hung up on because a lot of classical art, they did not include eyes or they painted the eyes in. Or they would do like David and it would be a slit. Although David has heart-shaped eyes. I did forget to mention that. Their pupils are literally heart-shaped.
Aw.
Yeah. Adorable.
I see it, yeah. Oh, I had no idea.
Anyway, so they rejected it. And then it ended up winning some awards anyway. But that's cool. Then he went back and re-sculpted it and took all the Pope's clothes away, but gave him eyes.
Nice. I like
I
that.
feel like he's just saying so much with this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what, but it probably isn't very nice. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of like,
But I also really kind of like it because it shows the humanity of the Pope. And the Pope had enough like self-awareness to be like, you know what? I can't do this till death. Because that's normally when you vote a Pope in, the cardinal's vote in, it's for life.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't.
you know,
I'm not the guy for this.
like you said, what am I trying to say here? It brings the Pope level to a more realistic human level because the Pope is like, you know, kind of holier than thou, like this really great symbol. But without the clothes, he is just a man.
He's just a dude.
So I kind of like this take on it.
I actually really do too. And the fact that he was around and this historical thing happened and he was able to do something with it, like to modify a pre-existing statue, but that also is like destroying work you've already created to create more work, which is incredible.
Yeah, oh yeah, because the first one was way simpler. Very simpler.
I kind of like, okay, I kind of see why they rejected it. It's really kind of plain, even if the eye thing was, maybe that was just their excuse. I don't know. But compared to a lot of art that's out there, you know, it's not very detailed. It's pretty smooth, but like not a lot going on. But then so he's obviously very capable.
Oh yeah. Wow.
The emotion that he puts in his pieces. So Michelangelo was like touted for the expression on David's face, like the concentration, the exaggerated brow. And this takes it to another level. This is crazy. And I feel like he did the same things in playing with the proportion.
Okay, I was thinking about that now that my consciousness has been aware to it.
Yes.
And now.
And I think that's probably a thing, though there's not a wealth of information on him. I have a whole book on Michelangelo, so just supposing. But it looks like the man's body is pretty large in comparison.
Yeah.
But it's that same kind of pose, and then you look at the hair like flowing.
Yeah, and I like the face, and also the muscle tension that's like in the neck.
Yeah, this I know it has a name, but like the definition is crazy. This reminds me of like old Greek mythology type sculpture.
Yeah,
like this could exist anytime.
Yeah.
Not necessarily right now. It definitely gives like
There's a story. Yeah, there's something
like,
with a story happening.
Very mythological. Because they loved the Greek and even in Rome. I mean, Roman myths and, you know, Zeus got around a lot. And not all participants were always willing. So
Yes, that is
this
true.
could easily be a similar depiction.
I agree with that. It's a baby looking at a baby.
And then he does stuff like this. And I included the photo with the little child for scale. And it's just out in the middle of the plaza. And you have a chain instead of an umbilical cord.
I was wondering, okay, I was like, I see the chain here. Okay.
That's meant to be there.
It's kind of got like a little Banksy, like little rebellion, like symbolism.
He does. He totally does. And I love the quote that he had on his website. It's, "My life is made up of failures. To sculpt something, you must first break it."
Dang. That is so true.
And
you have to break it.
It's not even just about sculpture. It really isn't. It's beautiful. I love it.
Wow.
So I definitely recommend going on to his Instagram because it was very difficult to find still images. Almost everything he has is video.
Okay.
And it is phenomenal. You get to see some of the process, but you also get to see the sculpture as it is intended in the 360. He moves around it. It's super cool, like mind-blowing. Please follow the links and check it out because you'll be doing yourself a disservice if you only look at these images. So I stole a quote from the Michelangelo book, and it was by John Gardner, who is a prolific educator in the U.S. You might be familiar if you've ever taken an art history class. He's essentially the dude whose name's on the textbook. So the responsibility for learning and growth rests finally with the individual. We can reshape the environment to remove obstacles. We can stimulate and challenge. But in the last analysis, the individual must foster his own development. At any age, the chief resource must be the individual's interest, drive, and enthusiasm.
You know, I do agree with that. It's really, no one is going to hold your hand for anything. It's really, really, really up to you. And it sounds so cliche, but it really is up to the individual's willingness to learn and desire to want to learn and to create and to put it out there.
Yeah.
No one's going to force you to do it.
No, nobody is. And it really is an internal thing. So when you're struggling with all these outside forces that are making you doubt yourself, don't. It all comes down to you at the end. And I think both of our artists today were exemplary examples of that.
Agreed. And from all of us here at Purple Easel, thank you so much for tuning in.
Make sure to check out Michelangelo and Iago Cardillo in the links below.
Join us at purpleeaselplus.com to paint with the world's largest paint sip studio online.
And if you're in Southern California, make sure to swing by the studio. In the meantime, create more and create often.
Bye. I forgot I said it. I don't know why I was waiting on you. Whatever.